What did you do on Friday night at NG Vegas? Or NG Conf, I mean.
I think me and Thomas just hung out.
Cool.
Little cozy evening at the hotel by the fireplace,
by the
drinking
fire.
wine. Yeah.
We had some wine. We had some,
romance.
some JavaScript, and
Shared a few laughs.
Had a moment.
Discussed the future.
Vim played a big role in it too. You know what I mean?
You guys watched the Vimitation game? Oh, bam!
The
Microphone drop.
Vimitation.
Joke time is over.
This episode is sponsored by the App Quality Bundle, the ultimate tool set for providing better software. It includes 6 leading tools for one incredibly low price. It's a full-stack set of tools that covers continuous integration, testing, and monitoring for your mobile apps, web apps, and APIs. It's great for new projects and companies. And the offer is $999 for 1 year of service for all 6 services. It is available for new paying subscribers only. Go check out the website at buildbetter.software for complete terms and conditions. The offer ends April 15th, so don't wait. Does your team need to master AngularJS? Oasis Digital offers Angular Bootcamp, a 3-day in-person workshop class for individuals or teams. Bring us to your site or send developers to ours, angularbootcamp.com. This episode is sponsored by Wijmo5, a brand new generation of JavaScript controls. A pretty amazing line of HTML5 and JavaScript products for enterprise application development in that Wijmo5 leverages ECMAScript 5 and each control ships with AngularJS directives. Check out the faster, lighter, and more mobile Wijmo 5. Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 37 of the Adventures in Angular show. This week on our panel we have Lucas Rubelke, Joe Eames.
Hey everybody.
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv. I just want to throw out a quick thank you to everybody who backed my Kickstarter campaign. I believe it really will help in kind of furthering the work with the podcast. So, yeah, just thanks. We also have a special guest this week, and that's Matias Niemelä.
Yeah, hello.
Do you want to introduce yourself really quickly?
Yeah, so my name's Matias. I work on the Angular team. I'm actually here working on it at Google, and I've been doing so for about 2 years. And the stuff that I work on mostly with Angular is AiA Animations.
Awesome.
And that's what we're going to talk about today, right, guys?
Yep. We should try to get you to commit from the podcast or something.
Commit? So I have this 8,000-line pull request. I could just take the risk and merge it in during the podcast, and then, potentially get put off the project right after.
Cue up the explosion soundtrack. 3, 2, 1, commit, boom.
No, nothing amazing happens without risk.
Yeah, I can totally hear him telling Igor. Chuck told me to.
Chuck said he would take care of it, so it's cool.
There's an old saying, victory goes to the bold.
I think it's a little too bold for...
Come on, Matias. You can always roll it back. Do it for the team.
Poverty goes to the stupid. Is that the other side of that?
Yeah. So we brought you on today to talk about animations. Do you want to give us kind of a quick overview of where animations are used and what kinds of animations we can do with Angular?
So Angular kind of took a different approach in animations right from the start, where it took them a while to sort of get them in, and it wasn't sort of important at the beginning. And then when the time came for animations, we sort of put this module on top of it. Basically, you have the core parts of Angular that do their thing, and then you have the animations that sort of latch themselves on top of an application. So unlike building websites, a few years ago where the animation code was in line with the actual application code, now with 1.2 and onwards, it's been a module that you add on top of it. And typically with Angular, there's 2 ways to do it, and that's using CSS directly or using JavaScript animations.
Yay!
So that stuff has been around for almost 2 years now. And now we're going into the territory of 1.4, and 1.4 has a slew of new things that are coming. 1.5 is going to sort of improve on these things, and then 2.0 and 1.5 we're going to have a shared code base. So I'll get to that later as we go through the podcast.
So I want to just talk briefly about the CSS animations and things like that. I played with NG Animate a little bit. And once I realized I had to write CSS animations, I also realized that wanting to do it in like 2 minutes was not going to happen. Did I miss something important, or is that more or less the way that you expect it to be done, where you create the CSS animations and then effectively add a class or add that style to the elements that you want to animate?
Yeah, you can go in the direction of JavaScript and, put a little bit more organization into your animations to have like sequencing and like add another animation library to it. Or you can just have, I'd say it's more of the 80-20 rule where the 80% is something as simple as, fading in something, sliding in something, and that's where CSS is really good. And I really like the way that Angular has it built out where it's just the CSS class that you reference in the HTML. So if you think about the coupling between the HTML and the CSS side, it's very, very small. Just a class that sort of is used between both platforms.
So I played around with animations a bunch. And one of the things that I found is that, one, it's just complicated to figure out the CSS animations to begin with. Plugging them into Angular wasn't like the hardest thing in the world, but man, there was a lot to do with just CSS animations to begin with. And then kind of like putting the moving parts together, it was really complex. But my biggest shock was the fact that there just wasn't really any really great resources that really walked you through. The Angular side itself had some basic stuff, but I felt like there was definitely a big gap there getting beyond I can do the hello world example and, a CSS animation and doing something more, the next step. There just wasn't much out there for the next step. I ended up trolling a lot of different resources, going around looking at a lot of different things, and never did find a really great resource that would just walk you through learning from very little to learning a lot. Kind
of the challenge with Angular in some ways is sort of what information is fresh, what information is detailed enough to get started. But the animations is just another small example of that. Like when I first wrote them, I made big articles about them, and things have changed a lot over time. And now with 1.4, there's another. It's not like it's completely different, but there'll be more information once 1.4 is out. And there was a pretty major change before. Sorry, Lucas, did you have a comment?
So just to kind of come back to your comment real quick, Joe, is I have a heavy Flash background, and so programmatic animation is something that I've been doing for years and years and years. And one of I think the best JavaScript animation library, GreenSock, started out as ActionScript and then got ported to JavaScript. And so I really like the way that Matias actually set up animations in Angular in the sense that it's kind of the candy shell around, the actual animation or the part of the code that's actually doing the work. And so for me, once I kind of understood how the hook went and how to actually hook it in, it was just hooking in the animation stuff that I already knew. And so it was really nice that Angular actually doesn't really do much other than gives you a set of hooks to drop in your animations. And so I would say when it comes to Angular animations, the hardest part is actually learning how to do the animations themselves.
The CSS part?
Yes. So CSS, I am very comfortable using JavaScript animations that make a little bit more sense to me. But once you understand that part, which is kind of a separate skill set, the actual Angular hooks for animations is pretty easy to figure out. And so I really like how they kind of just separated that out and said, animations, do your thing. We'll just give you the hooks to hook into our application.
Right. Yeah, when I was first looking at, which I think it was a couple of versions ago, so it was a little bit different. But I kind of noticed the same thing as you're saying, Lucas. The really complex part was the CSS animations. But there wasn't, like, you go and you look at resources on how to do CSS animations, and you learn some stuff there. And then you come over and look to doing it in Angular. One of the things that was really weird was I think at the time there was 3 different styles. There was animations, transitions, and then JavaScript animations, right? And each one hooked up just a little bit differently in Angular. Is that a poor representation, Matias, or is that accurate?
That's an accurate representation. And, it's like transitions and keyframe animations are different from one another, and they're still in the CSS realm, and then you have the JavaScript ones. It's, just the way that the web technologies are. Like, we've done everything we can not everything we can, but we're trying to really make the sort of translation between the CSS world into the animations being performed on the application as seamless as possible.
You're Google, you should just rewrite the internet.
Now, there was a major change in 1.2, right?
Yes.
And then there's going to be another pretty big change in 1.4, is that correct?
Not in terms for the end user. It's not like, oh no, they have to learn something new. It's going to be the same API. However, the internals have been broken up in a way that allows us to extend it better with future versions, and it also allows the developer to do more things.
So, Matias, something I've been wondering about with the animations. One thing I really enjoyed about JavaScript animations is to be able to do some kind of a promise where at the end of an animation I could perform some action. Is there going to be any way we could do something like that by hooking into the new Angular animations with the CSS?
Yes, there is. So the big key difference with 1.4, which I'm really happy to sort of point out, is back before with 1.2 and 1.3, we had the CSS code, which is very complex and, it figures out exactly how long the animation is going to run, and it does staggering and all that other stuff. That stuff was tucked away, and you couldn't use that stuff. However, now there's a service called Animate CSS where you can just throw in any combination of CSS, classes, styling, durations, easing, all that stuff, and it returns a callback promise that you can use in your code. So if, for example, you have a JavaScript animation, but you still want to use CSS within it, you can kind of mix them both much better.
Well, that'd be great, because that's something I've been really wanting to do more of, because I have another third-party library which I use animations, and I'm actually still stuck on JavaScript animations just because of that exact reason. Because while CSS animations are easy to use, if you actually want to perform logic around that, it makes it difficult to do without having some kind of a callback or a promise. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, that stuff right now is sitting in a pull request on GitHub that I believe Igor is filing through and should have it fairly soon. Like, the code is ready, it needs to be sort of polished up.
Another thing that I found that was really interesting when kind of trying to dig through and learn to do animations was the fact that so many examples were actually done using GreenSock. GreenSock's almost like the jQuery of the JavaScript animation world. Or the web animation world, Like, there's more examples in using GreenSock than there were just using plain CSS animations. And that kind of added in this extra level of, well, do I want to bother putting in GreenSock and learn that, or should I just be learning the plain, regular old CSS animations and transitions?
The answer is yes.
The answer is yes.
So I actually find that GreenSock's great, and I've been talking with Jack about sort of how can we work better together to make GreenSock sort of play better with Angular, and then to sort of the insights that he has from building such an amazing animation library, how can we put some of those insights into Angular? And he's been very helpful. And what I kind of came across when I talked with him is, I'm a CSS guy. Like, I know CSS very well, and I've used CSS for over a decade. And like, not many people, want to sort of bother playing with CSS and getting that into the mix. But a huge reason why there's so much CSS in Angular is sort of because I wanted to, not have to have a third-party framework. As amazing as all third-party frameworks are, I wanted to sort of embrace what the browser can do by itself.
Right.
So it's your fault.
It's my fault, yes. So that's why we have that Animate CSS service, because that's an extension of it, so you can do even more of CSS in 1.4.
Yeah, is the Animate CSS, that's been there a while, right?
It's been there a while, but it hasn't been there in the form of you as a developer being able to interface with it. So if, for example, I wanted to calculate a height based off some JavaScript code, and then in line with that height difference, I want to add a CSS class, and I want to set the duration to be a certain amount, and then I want to set easing, and then once it's all done, I want to execute this other animation. That's the kind of stuff you'll be able to do now. And you won't have to rely on GreenSock. You won't have to rely on jQuery. It will just pipe it directly through the CSS rendering system.
So I have two related questions, one of which I think you're answering, but I'll put it in a different way. The first question is that I want to be able to take action when the animation completes, and that has been hard, but I take it's easier now. And then the related question is, so I want to do some testing of some of my directives that have animations in them, and ideally I'd like to just be able to turn the animations off during the test because they don't really care, but in other cases I might want to turn them on. So what's the testing story?
Okay, so let's start with the testing first. So Angular definitely has a good testing story for animations. It isn't really well documented. I will definitely put work into documenting it once 1.4 is out. So we have angularmocks.js, and inside of there's a module called ng-animate-mock. What that will do is it will expose a spy on $animate, which will tell you what animations have been triggered. So you can effectively turn off animations, but you can still detect when animations are triggered within your own directives. I can provide a link, which we can sort of have with this podcast, that points to some of the internal animation code for some of the directives in Angular, such as ng-switch and ng-include, and the testing code that we have to detect when an animation is triggered.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful. I have looked into the source code and seen some methods to call to kill an automation or turn off the animating, but I hadn't really gotten a sense of how that whole thing goes together. So if you've got something on that, I think certainly benefit me, and I hope others.
Right. And I can't remember what the first question was. Could you repeat that?
The first question is, I want my own code to take action when the animation's complete. And I don't really necessarily know what they all are, particularly if I'm in a view model. I'm not sure that most of that might actually be in the UI. So what is the best way for a developer to know when the animation has completed? Maybe, something is slid in, the list is finally populated. Now you want to make something else happen or be possible and so forth.
Okay. So one of the major enhancements in 1.4 is that we sort of switched from the callbacks that were on the elements, so like element-based callbacks, because those existed for 1.3. We switched over them just to be directly in line with the animate service. So inside of your controller, if you were to inject $animate, you could set up an event listener, say $animate on, and say when a view element has finished its animation, then run this function. And that way, you're not messing with the DOM. You're sort of having an event listener inside of your controller, and in that way you can sort of react when animation has happened.
That's exactly the kind of separation I was looking for.
Right. This will get better over time with right now 1.4 it's there and we'll see how it works, and 1.5 we'll improve it over time. And then as we get further closer to 2.0, things will have better control over sequencing and detecting when animations end and controlling timelines and stuff like that.
So, Matias, as you're working through the Angular animations in 1.4 and then in 2.0, are they pretty closely aligned? I mean, are these two separate efforts, or is this something that you're seeing is kind of, not taking two different brain cycles to put together? And as far as moving and developers moving in that direction, what do you see as far as the struggles to go from 1.4 to 2.0 with the Angular animations for us?
It's going to be one repo, just like Brian's router code, which is going to be for 1.x and 2.0. It's going to be the same thing with ng-animate. So as soon as 1.4 is merged in, I'm going to repurpose all the unit tests and all the testing I did, and I'm going to sort of make the API work for 2.0 as the way it is right now. And then all the enhancements, all the cool stuff that 2.0 brings, there's going to be a whole other layer of animation features. So for now, what's going to happen is 2.0 is going to be the same sort of, enter active, leave active CSS stuff. The JavaScript portions might change. But the whole point is not to have two separate repos that have to be maintained, because that's too hard. So we're just going to have one repo, which is going to cross-compile down to 1.x and 2.x.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's cool building that. It's a lot of fun. Have you guys delved much with ES6 and the higher level language features that JavaScript is going to have soon?
Yeah, quite a bit. Loving it.
I guess I'll throw water on that. I have been, and I do love it, but in the same sense, it's not like there's something brand new that I've never been able to do before that I do with the S6 that I was just saying, wow, how has my life ever been made better by this? So, yes, I love new technology, but in the same sense, I'm getting along fine with the S5 too on many projects.
Well, you're a .NET developer, right, John Papa? That's your background. So you probably dealt with C# a lot, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a really feature-rich language, right? So you've been kind of spoiled. So if you think about us web developers, dealing with ES5 for the past 15 years, and now it's like, oh, cool, we can have classes now. It's a pretty mind-blowing thing.
It is pretty mind-blowing, but in the same sense, it's funny. When I went to the web world almost full-time about 3-4 years ago, I came from all having classes anew, and what's really interesting is at first, it was like, pulling away all of the crutches that I had. And then now, I don't even think about it. I don't even think about, wow, I need a class to inherit from, or I need generics, or there's ways people can get around for years, as you know very well. Obviously, I'm not telling anything you don't know. But
I'm going to say it, John. I hate classes. There. I said it right here on AiA. You heard it.
No!
I hate classes.
Hooray!
It's so amazing, getting off of classes and going to JavaScript with functions and objects. It's so pure and simple. It's almost beautiful.
See, the thing I like is I like the balance between classes and closures, right? Because I love functional programming. I love when you have a really cool combination of closures and you can do a lot of stuff with very little code. But sometimes everybody starts off with OO. So there's still this paradigm of object-oriented programming that, I adhere to. But I like being able to balance both of these together. So JavaScript, with the way that it's going, it's going to have a lot of these cool features, but you can really make some really cool, simple applications when you combine the best of both worlds. And that's what web development is entirely. If you think about CSS, it's not like laying out items with CSS, you do it one way. No, there's like 6 or 7 different ways you can do it, but you use one trick over the other when you have to.
Yep, I think there's definitely a place for all these things, and it's not like I'm not using classes or ES6 just because I want to stay firm to what I'm doing, but in the same sense, I'm also using the new features judiciously. I'm not going to switch just for the sake of switching. There are places and times to use all these things. So I just wanted to throw out there that it's not all flowers and roses for me.
Yeah, and I'm only kind of joking about classes. I hate the abuse of inheritance, which is a plague on static languages, and I'm fearful of what's going to happen when people bring that sensibility to JavaScript, and suddenly we have 3 and 4 level deep things, which were never good in our static languages and are no better here.
You know what I'm really worried about, Ward?
What are you worried about?
I like the annotations that are coming, right? With like TypeScript and AtScript, the old AtScript. But I'm a little worried about AOP going crazy. It happened a lot in the .NET world, and I'm afraid that we're going to have aspects on aspects on aspects.
Yeah, I think it's a real risk. But we took Matias's word there and we were running with it. So I'm going to swing it back to animations. And you know what? I don't know about you guys, but I love an animation when I see it, a good one, but I don't know how to pick them and I don't know how to write them. And I'm hoping that somebody's going to give me a set of them that sort of meet general functional needs that I have in my apps and I can use them. Matias, are you or is your group going to have a sort of side library of these? Is Material Design going to have a side library of these, or are you recommending anything?
Kind of both, actually. So there's a really cool library called Animate CSS, which works really well with Angular. You can just reference CSS classes and attach the animations, and then you can attach them to events in Angular. That's one way. The material design aspect, I haven't closely worked too much with material design. Like this whole animation refactor is sort of catering to the needs that material design needs. So definitely, as this gets further along, material design is going to have really cool and funky stuff. There isn't a need for us to make like a whole animations library that's going to be supported by Angular, because we're just trying to make it so that other libraries can really hook into Angular very easily. And I think that Lucas does work with animations as well. So have you found any other libraries outside of Animate CSS that you like using in GreenSock?
So I really like GreenSock. One interesting library that I was going to mention on my picks is called NGFX, done by Scott Moss, who was at NGComp, super rad guy, and he basically took Animate CSS and rewrote it as a set of directives on top of GreenSock. And so that's a really cool kind of a library that he did. So it's kind of Animate CSS style animations, but built with GreenSock.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that especially with this new timeline stuff that's coming, the better that we make this ecosystem of triggering animations and controlling animations, the more libraries hopefully will come about, and the easier the libraries will be to maintain and to hook into Angular. That's the long-term goal. I think that that's like sort of the combined focus of Angular in general is not to sort of compete with what's out there, but make it so that it can plug and play with other things very easily.
So, Matias, I do have a question, since we have this very public forum called Podcast, is what, and I know we've kind of talked about this, but I'd love to get a little bit more elaboration. Coming from kind of a Flash background, there's a framework called Gaia where you would actually, it had the idea of routes, but then you could actually kind of hijack the routes and then do kind of these transitions, these really cool transitions, and then give control back to the routing mechanism. What kind of integration, if any, do you have planned for having animations kind of play well with kind of routing to give us kind of those rich animated like page transitions from one page to another?
Right. So this has been a big undertaking with Angular, and I'm working on it. Me and Thomas Burleson have been working on this, and some of the Ionic guys have given their insights to this. The idea here is that you have some form of a view change, whether it's a route or whether it's some sort of like a view within the application, and you want to control the sequence of animations or the sequence of effects that occur between the change. So a lot of people just assume that this is routing, but this could very well just be some very smaller example of routing. So the idea is this timeline feature, which I demoed in NG Europe and when I showed a little bit more in NG Conf. The idea here is that you'll be able to have all these animations get triggered, but then you can control which ones occur and in what order. And you'll have this like mini DSL, and you can have the directive layer kind of determine what happens and for how long and pass data around. It's really, really powerful. And that's going to be the way to do it. Because if we were to go the route of having everything in CSS, it would get too complicated, and the JavaScript would get too complicated. So this timeline thing is there for the more advanced stuff.
Would I be able to hook that into the router? I mean, that seems to me, and maybe you can correct me, seems like the logical place to do it. Neither the view from which I'm coming nor the view to which I'm going would necessarily know much about what the animation should be. So I'm kind of like Archimedes. Where do I stand?
So yeah, you would. So the routing aspect. So I'm trying to not couple this with routing, and I'm trying to not couple it with like a particular configuration file. The idea is that any form of a view change. So if you think about a route, that's ng view or ng or UI view or the new router view, changing the view element. So it's the view element that's going to trigger the animation, and then you just attach that timeline to the combination of view elements. Does that make sense?
I see. So if I had that placeholder where the views were going to be swapped in and out of, that's the place to insert my animation instruction?
Yes. So think about CSS, right? It's not like, you explicitly say in your application that this thing has a style. No, you have a style sheet that latches on to the application. Same thing is going to happen with this timeline stuff, is that you have a timeline behavior that latches onto some component inside of your application.
That might just work.
We're hoping so.
It just might.
It's been there's a lot of stuff that's been developed for it. Like I've written it like 4 or 5 times, and the reason why I keep doing it is because I build it, it works, it's cool, but then we want to do something else. And we just want to support as much things as we can and sort of think of this paradigm, because if we do it properly and it works, it could really bring forth a bunch of really cool websites down the road.
So what about the idea of adding, and I'm a big proponent of this, so I'll pitch it out there, of adding in default animations to all the kinds of transitions and hide and show and all that kind of stuff that are in Angular. It's something I've found a lot of frameworks that a lot of people don't use these things until they know what's there and how to use them. But what if there was something just out of the box that just a default simple animation, kind of like Material Design is doing? Have you guys thought about that?
Yeah, well, that should be possible. You just, if you, for example, animate CSS, you have to do the work to assign which animations, but if you as a developer were to make something that just automatically plugs and plays with Angular, you should just be able to use CSS directly.
And that's, I guess, what I'm saying is why not have just ng show, ng hide, ng switch, all that kind of fun stuff. UI router, the ng new router, that thing. All those kind of things just automatically hook into the animations by default and have a very subtle animation.
I would say that, you probably like it for like the first week of doing things, but then you're like, I don't want to have an animation here. And then you're doing extra work to disable things. So it's like, which side of the coin are you on? Are you on the side that, is adding more features, or are you on the one that has every first and you're just disabling things?
Animations should be mandatory. You can't disable them.
Yeah.
And I think they should take 4 seconds for every transition, too.
Should we also use Comic Sans for the font on the website as well?
And a blink tag. And a marquee.
Yes.
Did you guys ever see the original Angular docs website?
Oh, God.
Yes.
It's like yellow and purple. And
I just saw at a large corporation that I remain nameless, I just saw a new website that was created that had a marquee going across the top. So I had to laugh and giggle a little bit.
I think that tag was deprecated in Chrome. I don't think you can use marquee in Chrome.
Exactly. I think they had to fight to get it back. That's what I think was funny, is it took a lot of effort to actually make this happen.
That's an enterprise feature, man. You can just break the whole enterprise app with that. You got to keep that. Back on a serious note, so Matias, as you're exploring all these things, do you have a canonical app that sort of reveals what you can do, what you're striving to do, that sort of helps us learn about that? Is that part of the distro for you?
Yeah, so I've been building websites for a long time, and I really like to build them, and I'm always building one thing or another, even in my own spare time. And one thing that me and Lucas put together last year is we put this YouTube browsing website together. And I've always liked working with that API. So that YouTube thing, I just have this like website that I have for myself, like a YouTube website, and I keep testing out all this animation stuff on there. A lot of prototypical things on there. And that's sort of the website that I'm driving everything with. There could be other use cases that I'm sort of not including in my applications, but the way that I see it, it's a website I can add pages, even if the pages don't make sense, I can add them in there just to test them out and see how it works.
Something like that would be great to ship as part of documentation or something, huh?
Yeah.
For us to learn, or maybe you can even give us a link for the show if you care to have anybody look at it, or is it closed?
No. Right now it's just somewhere on my computer, but once 1.4 is out and once the timeline stuff is out later on, I will sort of be updating and showcasing this website with all the new animations. Because there's no other way you can really do it. You can't just, write tutorials that you don't have a demo app with. You have to have a demonstration app, because that excites people, and that's something to work with and hack and fool around with. Like, how often do you guys learn new things by reading a book? No, you take an existing tool and you sort of fiddle around with it, right?
If we can.
Yeah.
Some of the time it's really rough out there. So I can't take examples for granted. I don't know about you guys.
No, there's nothing like just diving into a code sample and kind of seeing how things are done, especially how experts like Lucas or Matias are doing these kind of things, so we can kind of learn the right and wrong ways to do that stuff. Because one of the worst things about documentation is sometimes you get lost in the technical meaning of how things work, but the pictures with 1,000 words, just actually seeing it in action is really helpful.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, Matias, I'm going to put you on the spot. You keep talking about when 1.4 is out and when 1.4 is out. And at NGConf, it seemed like it was going to be any minute. So, you got any news for us?
Yeah, I do. I'm the reason why. I'm the bottleneck with with 1.4. It's because what happened was with NGConf, I was like, all right, basically, before I had my presentation, I'm like, the work's done. And they're like, cool, where is it? And I'm like, oh, it's 8,000 lines of code. Okay, cool. I'm like, you guys can review that in one day. They're like, yeah, okay. So it's been going back and forth for the past week. And then I moved to California, so it's just in the final stages of being reviewed and fixed up. And then once that's out the door, then we will have 1.4 out.
All right, now I'm back to trying to get you to commit during the show.
Just do it.
Yeah, so we are almost there with 1.4, and things will only get better from 1.4 on. There's a lot of bugs that I'm fixing with NG Animate in the state that's in. That's the reason why this whole refactor is coming around, because there's certain things that were unpatchable. But I'm very happy with the way that turned out. There's a lot of really cool stuff in there, and we will see how this stuff will evolve into 2.0.
Any migration issues that we should highlight, or did you already do that?
There's a couple small breaking changes. Those will be highlighted in the release notes. It's the stuff with the callbacks. And there's one other breaking change where you can't have a JavaScript animation and CSS one running at the same time. But that's the reason why we have the Animate CSS service, so that if you do make a JavaScript animation, you can just use CSS inside of there. So it's not really a breaking change. It's just a different way of doing it. And, it's not like the main thing was not to sort of break the API and do everything over again, because it's been changed a few times already. So I like the way that it is built, and from the next versions that are coming are not going to be these drastic changes. It'll just be upgrades to the animation system.
All right, well, we're pretty much at the end of our time. Is there anything that we didn't ask about that we should have?
Well, there's still the stuff with the timeline, but the timeline stuff is coming later on this year. That stuff, I will definitely have more demos with that as stuff goes on, but in regards to animations, no, there's the stuff for 1.4 we've all talked about.
All right, good deal. Well, let's go ahead and do picks then. Joe, do you have a pick and a tip for us?
All right. So my pick is going to be the movie McFarland, USA, with Kevin Costner.
Okay.
It was actually an awesome movie. It was rated PG, if you can believe it, that they do still make non-animated movies that are rated PG. And it was awesome. Beautiful movie. Really enjoyed it, but with a buddy of mine, and saw the movie and just had a grand time. And definitely a movie you should see. So I highly recommend McFarland USA. And I'm also going to pick Matias, because he's coming to Vegas, and he's going to be on a panel, and you can ask him not only the hard questions we asked today, but even harder questions. And we're going to nail him down. He won't be allowed to answer any questions without a firm commitment. No, I'm excited to have Matias on the panel at NG Vegas.
Yeah, it would be cool to hang out with you guys again.
Yeah.
Awesome. Ward, do you have a pick and a tip?
A few first, and I'm sure we should have done this, but I thought Matias's presentation at NGConf 2015 was superb. And if we don't have the link on the show, we should put it there. He can't say that, but I can tell you it was really good. From the movie category, I loved Citizen 4, which is about Snowden. I thought that was chilling. If one-sided, it was still chilling and worth watching. And then last week, I mentioned a book that I was excited about, but I couldn't remember the title. And so I've got it now. It's called Teach Like a Champion, and it's about techniques that have been observed in effective teachers in the classroom. And I think of those techniques as being equally useful if I'm trying to make a presentation internally to a group of my own folks, or on stage to in a workshop setting, or perhaps even in a talk. So I wanted to recommend that.
Awesome. Lucas.
So you already got one pick. That's NGFX by Scott Moss. Pretty cool library. And my second pick is the book that Igor mentioned on his talk at NGConf, Search Inside Yourself by Chade-Meng Tan. And I've started to read that, and it is a pretty humorous book, but it's just talking about mindfulness. And so Igor's talk really resonated with me, and so I've been trying to apply some of those techniques to my life. And this just an excellent book, and pretty easy to read. And I think that the benefits are exponentially obvious once you get into it.
All right. I've got a pick or two. The first one is, again, I just want to thank everybody who backed the Kickstarter campaign. I'm also going to pick a book that I read. It's Ready Player One. I know it's been picked on the show before.
Oh, I was going to say that just now for my pick. That's a great book.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I listened to it on Audible in like 2 days because I just couldn't put it down. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed that. There's another book I'm reading right now that I'm going to mention. It's called Mastery by Robert Greene. It's basically like 40 principles or techniques for gaining mastery in some topic or something like that. So anyway, it's really, really good. And I'm really enjoying it. The first half hour or so of the book on Audible I didn't really like, but it started to make sense why he started that way once I got past that. I didn't feel like it introduced that very well. But the rest of it's great, and it's got terrific examples from all kinds of people who have mastered stuff, people you've heard of, so anyway, those are my picks. Matias, go ahead. Do you have some picks?
Yeah, I was going to mention Ready Player One. I actually haven't finished the book yet, but I'm reading it. It's really cool. One thing I'll pick out for anybody who's a Vim developer, if you haven't upgraded to NeoVim, I would advise that you do, because it fixes a lot of things and it's really cool. I haven't seen any movies lately that I could suggest. Nothing that comes to mind. But that's pretty much for my picks that I have.
Awesome. All right. Well, I don't think we have any announcements unless Joe or Ward have announcements about Angular U or NG Vegas.
Well, Joe, you already brought up NG Vegas, which is going to be great. And did you tell people when that is?
May 7th and 8th.
Right.
So the next month.
It's coming so fast. And Angular U is in June.
With a very awesome speaker. You may know him. His name's Joe Eames.
His name is Joe Eames, and that's the reason I'm going.
I've heard of that guy.
I had to beg, scrape, and borrow to be able to get to see that guy. And I'm hoping that maybe Matias will honor us with his presence as well.
No, I'll be there, but I don't believe I'm talking. Hopefully I can convince Brad about something, but from this point on, I haven't agreed to have a talk yet.
Well, that's because Joe is taking your place.
Yeah.
It was either Matias or Joe. And
it was me, Matias, or Joe, and we said that's no contest.
Yeah, Joe's the bigger guy and will break your knuckles.
Yeah, I was a bit afraid of him at NGConf. So.
Most people are.
Awesome. All right, well, let's wrap up the show. We'll catch everyone next week. This episode is sponsored by Mad Glory. You've been building software for a long time, and sometimes it gets a little overwhelming. Work piles up, hiring sucks, and it's hard to get projects out the door. Check out Mad Glory. They're a small shop with experience shipping big products. They're smart, dedicated, will augment your team, and work as hard as you do. Find them online at madglory.com or on Twitter at madglory. Hosting and bandwidth provided by the Blue Box Group. Check them out at bluebox.net. Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CacheFly.com to learn more. Do you want to have conversations with the Adventures in Angular crew and their guests? Do you want to support the show? Now you can. Go to adventuresinangular.com/forum and sign up today.